Well, hi everybody, Father Alex here. Welcome to another episode of the Godcast. I'm the vicar of St Matthew's Church. I am the host of this podcast, the Godcast. I'm also the author of Our Daily Bread from August to the Altar, a priest story, which is available in all good bookshops and online. My guest today is a wonderful entertainer. Steve Royle is known for comedy, for Panto, for variety, a host of things, and it's going to be great listening to his journey and his forthcoming production of Cinderella, which will be at the Blackpool Grand. So do enjoy this interview now with Steve Royle, and if you do enjoy it, then please do subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on X. You'll find me there at Alex DJ Frost. But for now, enjoy this interview with Steve Royle. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is legendary entertainer Steve Royle. Steve, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Yes, lovely to be joining you this morning with my branded cup. Should we get the bit of branding in straight away? Look how tiny my head is. I don't. You know, there's no benefit for those listening on a podcast, but if you get the video, I'm not. It looks like I could be interested. Should I do a quick impression? I'll do a quick impression of an egg. There you are. Look, there you are. Look at that boiled egg. Boiled egg, anyone?
Love it.
Oh dear.
Steve, I've really been looking forward to getting you on. I've had loads of comics on, but I've got a few favourites, and we'll unpack why I'm so chuffed to have you on as we go through. But I first came across you, Steve, many years ago with my young children. It were raining somewhere near Chorley.
Yeah, that could be. Oh, that could be any day.
We decided to take cover and watch some jousting.
Boy.
And who's there in front of me throwing balls in the air and looked like he was having a right good time, but your good self keeping the customers entertained at Camelot. It's quite a long time ago, but does it feel like a long time ago now, Steve? Or
it was only a few weeks ago I realised I was trying to find out because honestly, you're not the first person obviously who says this. You know, I get so many people as I gig up and down the country who say, "Oh, we used to bring our kids there," and it's actually 20 years ago this year. So it was half term. We used to finish the season at the end of half term, so it would have been about this week, 20 years ago, that I finally left Camelot, which is mad to think it's 20 years. And it's even more crazy to think that people like yourself still remember me from that. You know what I mean? But I suppose it was the development of my career in so many ways.
what I remember, Steve, because I've loved comedy all my life. I really have. It's I love it as an art form. I had a go at doing it. I've had a go at writing it. But what I saw before me was a guy that was good, actually, and perhaps deserved a bigger audience. I thought that right from the point. I remember saying to him, he's good, this guy. He's actually quite funny. I'll put me ham sandwich down for him listening and tune in. It was it were like that. The other thing I always used to wonder was, what does a jouster do at the end of the season? But what's the next job? What did you all? I know you weren't a jouster. You were. What did everybody do after that?
Well, it was mad actually. I did actually join them one year. There was one winter season because what used to happen was we'd shut down at the end of October, like I said, the October half term, and then obviously they still had the horses, so that some of the lads would be kept on looking after the horses, and then the rest of them would be working on site, doing the maintenance of things. You've got to remember that even though these theme parks and places like that are seasonal, there's still an awful lot of work that needs to be done. Actually, fixing rides, painting things, and so we all used to give these menial tasks. It used to always make me laugh anyway. The fact that this Sir Lancelot and King Arthur and the Black Knight and be in front of 2,500 people one day, and by the following week they're in the rough gear, mucking out horses and scrubbing down old rides and greasing up, if you like, greasing these rides down. So I joined them one year. There was a ride called the Rack, and when that was brought into Camelot, it was quite a big deal because it was the first time they bought a brand new ride for a long time. And the jousters, we got all invited to. Well, to say invited, we got asked if we'd do the theming of the ride, if you like. So I remember I spent all winter unraveling rope to go around. They were like stakes in the ground. Obviously, this rack was the idea that, you know, the old medieval torture thing. That was the idea of the ride, if you like. So I'd be there. They'd have these big wooden poles in the ground, and then they'd wrap rope round it. Now, instead of the skinflints that they were, my bosses, instead of buying, you know, 1,000 meters of rope or anything, they found about 100 meters of ship rope. Now, ship rope is like proper thick, like, you know, like probably about 6 inches thick. And my job was to unravel this, which sounds like the simplest of things, but when you got 100 meters of this, so you'd start off dead simple, you'd go like that. It's like plaited, if you like. So you'd undo the plait, and then your arms are getting a bit further apart. And then it gets to the point where you're actually physically having to stand up and walk 10 feet that way with one bit of rope, 10 feet that way. And honest to God, it took me hours and hours and hours.
I can picture it all because, I mean, like I say, I was a regular at Camelot. When it all ended, Steve, your heart must have sunk a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd already left by then, but I had a lot of mates who were still working there, and I would say my heart. I had contacts that could get me in for free, and it was just a point where kids were just getting old enough to go on the rides. So I've had 20 years having to take her and paying to go to a theme park. So yeah, that was my biggest disappointment.
So we go our separate ways, and a few years later, I'm riding on the back of everybody else on the crest of the wave of Phoenix Nights, and I'm in a theatre with Dave Spikey watching him perform. But who comes on before and warms up the audience? But it's you, and
yeah,
and you're throwing all sorts in the air, aren't you? And was that always the plan, Steve, to become, you know, full-time comic? How did it all pan out from leaving Camelot?
well, you know what? I mean, my whole life has been a quest to become an actor, really, and I've still not made it. Well, I have. I did. I'll come to that in a bit. I did finally get on the West End stage and performing, and it's one of the reasons why I love pantomime so much, is because I actually get to do some proper acting each year, actually learn a script, and, well, vaguely, you know, I'll never stick to it, but I'll try my best. But I started off at the London Theatre Workshop many, many years ago, with the likes of, well, so who was there with me? Anna Friel, Saran Jones, Stu Wolfenden, who went on to do Dead Man Weds, Dead Man Shoes, and so many great actors came out of Oldham Theatre Workshop. So I always wanted to be an actor. And when I originally learnt to juggle, it was simply to supplement the acting degree, the acting, you know, the CV, if you like, just have something on there. And then it just took over. The juggling took over, and then the first job I ever had was at Granada Studios tour as an entertainer there. That lasted 2 years there, then went on to Camelot and 13 years there. And then the comedy started to pick up from having done medieval banquets and the like whilst I was at Camelot. And then the stand-up started to take over. It's a crazy, really. It's in so many ways. I often point this out to people who say, you know, what advice can you give to people in a career in show business? And I think the key for me has been just to try everything, try as much as you can, because you might think you want to go down one route, you might think that's the perfect route for you, but you might be surprised along the way. I never dreamt I'd be a comedian at all. Never thought, you know, it was an idea that, you know, maybe I used to always be the funny one in class, etc. But it was never my intention, certainly not to do stand up and stand there on my own.
Where was the first gig? Where did you actually give stand up a trial, a run out?
Well, I was forced into it again. It's not something I would have dared do myself. I used to go and watch a mate of mine who's a great stand-up in Liverpool called Brendan Riley. And Brendan, I used to go and watch him, and he used to always say, "Oh, you should do this, Steve." And I go, "Oh, mate, I know I've got the nerve to do that. It's so brave of you to get up there." This is like we used to do extra work and stuff together on film sets and things. And then in 1999, I got surprised at a medieval banquet whilst I was working at Camelot by Les Dennis and a whole film crew. And they were filming for a new series. It only ever did one series at Granada. It was the same production company that did Stars in Their Eyes back in the day. And it was called Give Your Mate a Break. And as part of that, Les Dennis came in and surprised me and says, right, we're going to take you away, Steve, work on your act for a week, and then you're going to be on live television on Saturday nights in front of however many millions of people. So at the time, it was exciting, but I didn't get much from the actual show. But what I did get during the week that I was working on the act, if you like, they said, we thought the other film crew just surprised me one day with Paul Zenon, who's become a really good friend of mine as well, a magician, originally from Blackpool. And he was my mentor, if you like. And he popped in with the film crew one day while we were rehearsing the show and said, Steve, got a bit of a surprise for you tonight. There's an audience you've never done before. We're going to take you to the Frog and Bucket Comedy Club in Manchester. And you're going to be performing on that stage. Let's see how you can last just 6 minutes. Anyway, I went along. I did not just 6 minutes, I ended up doing 12 minutes. And the owner, Dave Perkin, who I still know to this day, he was so impressed. He gave me a full weekend booking for the year for about 6 months later. And on that weekend, the very first weekend I did stand up was when Peter Kay came along to see me because he'd had a tip off about my act by the compere at the time, Neil Fitzmaurice, who was co-wrote Phoenix Nights, of course, with Dave Spikey, etc. And Peter Kay came to watch me. And next thing is I was touring with Peter Kay. So it all happened very, very quickly, the stand-up routine.
I think why I want you, where you're a very likable guy anyway, Steve. But I think if I'm being honest, I feel like sometimes you're living out my dreams because I did the Frog and Bucket. My first gig, it was Beat the Frog. Is that what you were talking about just then? Did Beat the Frog?
No, I never did Beat the Frog. It's a difficult one. These competitions, Gong shows and Beat the Frogs and stuff like that, they can make and break. People like yourself who are probably disillusioned by a response from. You've always got to remember, whatever you do in entertainment, you've got to think about what the purpose. It's the same when I did Britain's Got Talent, which we'll probably come to later on. You've got to think about what they are wanting from the show. You might want your own agenda, but for things like Beat the Frog, they just want someone to die on the backside. It's got to be entertaining for people. So it's never a good assessment of where you are. No good comic ever wants to go on stage and try and do just 3 minutes. The first 3 minutes are just setting up your character. Do you know what I mean? Setting up, and it's almost impossible to win an audience over in just 3 minutes.
Do you know what, Steve? You've made the assumption that I was crap.
No, I've noticed that's what I'm saying exactly the opposite.
But I loved it. I loved it. The disillusionment came a bit further down the line, actually. But,
right.
But I did enjoy it, but it was like it's a tough place to learn the craft, isn't it? And I don't think I ever fully learnt the craft. But the next link that I think intrigues me about you, which you won't even know, is that we did, because I thought I'm not very good as a stand-up, but I still like writing it. I used to send scripts to Dave Spikey, and he was and it's funny, isn't it, how paths may turn out. I'll just plug my book, published author now, Our Daily Bread, Argos to the Altar.
Brilliant.
I wouldn't have written that, Steve, if it weren't for your mate Dave Spikey, because he was the only person. I used to send scripts off everywhere and never got any responses, except I got one from Dave Spikey once. He said, I want to use a bit of your material. And it was like, blimey heck, this is fabulous. For me, it was a big thing, you can imagine, can't you?
Yeah.
But you I don't know if you're still good mates with him, but you were quite close, weren't you, for a while?
Absolutely, yeah. And we still meet up every now and again. In fact, I texted him a couple of days ago, just someone actually wanted to book him, funny enough. But he's one of the most generous people I've ever met in my life, and certainly the biggest influence on my stand-up career. When I went on tour with Dave Spikey back in, I think it was about 2002, 2003, just after the Phoenix Nights, and we used to share a car together to journeys, and on the journeys, I'd tell him stories of things I've been up to, and he used to encourage me to say, "Why don't you tell that on stage tonight? That's so funny, Steve. That's so funny." And I'm going, "Oh, you really think?" And then I started to tell these stories about just trivial little detail, just things that had happened to me. And he was the one who had encouraged me to do that. And as a result, that's how I got into like proper stand-up, if you like. And eventually, the stand-up began to take away more from the juggling, whereas a lot of my acts up until that point, certainly at Camelot, was all about audience participation, getting people cheering, getting people up on stage, etc. It was all very interactive. And suddenly he taught me a new way of doing comedy. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. And like you say, it does not surprise me whatsoever that you're one of the few who responded to you, because that's the kind of guy he is. It is the most lovely and most humble as well of anyone I've ever met.
I've seen him live loads of times, and I've corresponded with him quite often, but I've never actually met him. But I do have, behind my settee here is a script. I wrote a script called Tales from the Up. It was about Britain's longest serving picture pub attendant. And he critiqued it for me from beginning to end, and I'll treasure it because chances are it'll never get made now. But just that generosity but is that something that you find in the comic community, Steve? You know, that it's like I say, I've interviewed lots of comedians, and probably a bit more traditional. You know, I've had people like Billy Pearce on who it just still makes me laugh. You know, that do you think there's a band of brothers and sisters in that comedy community? You're all rooting for each other.
It's a weird one we are, and then there's also the as I suppose any competitive industry, there's still the little bit of infighting and talking about people behind their backs. I think that's just inevitable. In some sense, it's insecurity in ourselves. I've always felt a little bit on the outside. And I know people. I've got mates who I've got my best mates are comedians, and they all tease me all the time about oh, you're a prop act, you juggler. Now, I don't do that much juggling in the act, but I can take it now, but it does rise with me a little bit. Oh, it's always made me feel like I'm a little bit on the outside of the standard. But since Britain's Got Talent, actually, since I did that, it made me realise that's what I do. That's what sets me apart from anyone else. And so there was a time where I used to fight against it and try not to do any juggling in my spot just to prove a point to other people. I thought there's no point proving a point to other people if it's not going to be as entertaining for the people who come to watch you. So, yeah, in that sense, there is a camaraderie, but there's an awful lot of competition as well.
So, just moving this on a little bit, another connection that I have, I did Britain's Got Talent with a vicar mate of mine. We were called Jack and Cracker. And another link is that I know you're mates with Tony Vino, aren't you?
Yeah.
And I spoke to Tony. I know Tony's done gigs for us and stuff. And I spoke to him about it. And he said, well, it's a strange territory to enter. But, if you go within it with the right intentions, it could be great. And for us, we got in front of those judges, and the buzzer went off before I actually even opened my mouth. So that's how it turned out. That's how it turned out for me. But we've also had Jonathan Antoine on the Godcast, who was the opera singer, the big lad who had an extraordinary voice, and how he loved the experience. How easy was it for you, Steve, to take that on? Because I think it came with a risk. Did you think of it in that way when it came?
Well, for many years I did, and that's why what people don't realise is that I was being asked, professional acts like myself and so many others, they get asked to go on these shows. And it's not quite the same as just turning up on a damp Friday and sitting around for 14 hours and we're hoping to be seen. We are we are in that privileged position of where we do get asked to do these things. And I was asked for about 10 years before I did Britain's Got Talent. I actually, at one point, the first year, I went down to London and met with the producers, and they tried to persuade me to do it. And I said yes at the time. And then at the last minute, they ditched me from the show, said, we don't need you on anymore. And I thought, well, you're messing me about now. I said, I won't do it again. And it went on and on. And every year they'd ask me, every single year without fail. And then there was something about 2020 that just made me, I think it sounds ridiculous now, because when it got to 2020, I thought, do you know what? It's got a good ring to it. As that the year sounds good. I mean, it was for all the wrong reasons. It became a notorious year, didn't it? But I just thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it this year. And one of the biggest. I've told this story to so many people. One of the biggest influences of me doing Britain's Got Talent in the end was I've done pantomime at the Grand Theatre in Blackpool, for the plug, for 21 years. At the time, there never used to be any competition, and there never has been any competition. But that particular year, the Opera House, which is a much bigger theatre, 3 times the size, announced for the first time they were going to do a pantomime as well. and they were big in it as Blackpool's biggest pantomime. And I felt aggrieved. It was a kind of a gentleman's agreement that had been agreed many years before between the Grand Theatre and the Opera House that they'd put on any kind of Christmas show. Be it, they could even be Peter Pan or Christmas Carol or something like that, but never actually compete panto wise. And then suddenly they're putting out that they've got the biggest panto in Blackpool. I thought we've worked really hard over the years. I've been there 20 years to really build that pantomime up into something special, and then they're trying to undermine it. So that was one of the main reasons I went, right, you know what? I'll just go on telly for 5 minutes. I get 5 minutes. And if it gives us a bit more of a plug for the pantomime next year, then albeit. And then I never envisaged how far it would go at all. One of the other things about when I did do Britain's Got Talent, when I finally caved in, if you like, was I went, do you know what? I'm going to do it. There's not many opportunities for an actor my age, and certainly my gender, if you like, these days on television. It's very difficult to get a break. So I thought I'll go on, and I'm just going to enjoy it. I'm determined. I've done so many television things in the past and not really enjoyed it because of the stress, and it is a very stressful medium to work in. And I thought this year I'm just going to go out and have a right good time, and that's exactly what I did. And and I think the pandemic, in some respects, enhanced that because obviously I didn't had any opportunity to entertain that year either, apart from on Zoom shows and stuff like that. So to actually have an audience and be able to entertain was suddenly this was like an opening up as the year progressed, through that series. Because what people forget that series started in, we filmed it. There was no restrictions when it was filmed in January, February. I remember by the time, lockdown occurred, it was on telly. Everyone was in lockdown. It got record viewers as a result, but then they didn't even know they'd finish it. Eventually, it went on to September, October. There was the final that year. So it dragged on a long time.
And I don't want to say, was it, I'm sure it wasn't person changing, because I think I've seen enough of you to know that you're the person that you are and you're comfortable in your own skin. But was it life changing for you?
Yeah, I mean, life changing. It was a weird one because obviously at the time I did it, there was so many restrictions and stuff, so I couldn't really capitalize it. You suddenly get a bit of fame and recognition, and you're having to walk around with half your face covered. It's just typically. I was going into supermarkets going, recognize these eyes? You recognize them? Me, off the telly. So I did have one moment, and I giggle about now is when I was walking through a park just after the semi-final had been on telly, and I got stopped by the police and went, oh, what have I done now? I think I've got my mask on, etc. I'm all right. I'm outside. I don't need a mask on. They just wanted a selfie. I got two police officers in a park in Chorley asking me for a selfie. So that was bizarre, if you like. But in terms of life changing any other aspects, the only way it's changed really is in terms of it is daft, isn't it? You put a bit of television credits onto your CV, and people start paying you more and stuff to become. But it also has expanded me to. I used to be, have quite a decent captive audience in the north and northwest, but any further afield than that, going down south, certainly I wouldn't have to. But now if I do gigs, I mean, I was in Bognor Regis on Monday night, and people coming up recognise me from Bognor Regis. So it's made me, national, if not international, anyway.
Yeah. So it got you hot tub then.
Oh, it got me hot tub, yeah. Can't afford to put it on now, though. Not with it. The energy prices have scuppered that. I'm thinking of turning it into a planter.
So I want to talk to you about the Grand, and Panto, but I want to talk about the Grand first of all, because as I've said, I don't want to talk about my love of comedy, but the Grand is a very special theatre for me. My comedy hero, I'm interested to know who yours is, Steve. My comedy hero is Les Dawson, and I saw him there in 1985 in Run for Your Wife. He was doing the summer season when summer seasons were popular, and you could struggle to get a ticket. And he was with Eric Sykes, and another mate of yours had a bit part. Ted Robbins had a bit part in the play. And it was the first encounter I had with Les Dawson, and I loved it that much. I was only 16, and I loved it that much. I went back and sat in the gods up at the top. I paid a £5 for my ticket, and and it really started getting me thinking about comedy, and particularly Les Dawson, and who I thought is just a genius. His writing and all that. Where was your who were your heroes, Steve, as a younger guy when you were making your way or thinking about being an entertainer?
Well, I suppose I always remember, and people ask me who's the most influential comic of my life. My mum and dad were all big fans of Ken Dodd. They loved Ken Dodd. I remember we went to see him in pantomime and shows. And I always say to this day, he would have been undoubtedly the greatest comedian ever. If he hadn't for the fact he then became notorious, and he kind of made a rod for his own back by just going on stage for too long. And he used to think that was why people went to see him. In actual fact, if he condensed, he used to like 5-hour shows. I remember walking past the Grand Theatre, funnily enough, many years ago, and I thought, I was doing something in Blackpool, and it was about 10:30 at night, and the bar was open. I said, I'll have a drink. So I went in and was chatting to people I know there. I said, oh, brilliant, what's just finished? He says, oh, it's not finished. Ken Dodd's on. It's the interval. This was 10:30. It started at 7. So it's just, poor guy. I'm thinking, flipping. If he'd just done 45 minutes on each half of his quality gold material, he would have been the greatest ever, like I said. So he was hugely influential. And then I remember most influential, funny enough, in pantomime. I remember going to see, must have been the early 80s, I went to see Lenny Henry in pantomime in Manchester, I think it was. And I remember there was one particular point where a kid walked up to the front of the stage and was shouting something like they do in pantomime. And this happens to me now. I always have a little bit of Lenny Henry in my mind when this happens. But this little kid started to talk to him, and Lenny Henry just stopped the whole show and then lay on the front of the stage, like with his arms like, going, yeah, go on, tell me what. And this kid was telling him all what had been happening in the pantomime so far. He's going, you're joking. She's done what? The Wicked Queen? Oh, thank you for it. And it was just, and I always remember that. And I always remember thinking, I want to be him. I wanted to be able to do that one day. I'd only probably be, probably about 10, 11 at the time. But that was hugely influential. And then going, straight down the line, more recent. I remember as I got into comedy, I used to idolize people like Lee Evans. Lee Evans was just the greatest for me personally, absolutely brilliant. And I'm always looking at. There's new comics now who are doing incredibly well, very talented. I get an influence from all over, many areas anyway. But I do particularly have a soft spot for anyone who does something a little bit wacky, a little bit different, a little bit left field, if you like, because that's the kind of comedy I do.
It's great. I love hearing about Ken Dodd. I mean, I went to see him. I got home at 1:30. I only live in Burnley. It's like. But yeah, extraordinary guy. I remember my introduction to Panto. I was only about 17 actually, and I don't know if Vickers can admit to having a dirty weekend, but I met who is now my wife Sarah. We come to Blackpool. We told our parents we were staying at each other's house, and we slipped off to Blackpool. I remember seeing Danny LaRue at the Grand in Panto. And that forever that theatre holds a special place. I try and get to it as much as I can. But in terms of Panto, it is legendary, isn't it? And you clearly love it, Steve, because you've been doing it for so long. Unless it pays you exceptional money, you just can't turn it down. But you must really love it.
I would find it very hard to ever do pantomime anywhere else. I did do an Easter one actually, which was quite interesting, going on tour last year, but that was only because they don't do one at the Grand Theatre. I love everything about it, the history. I mean, I studied history. That's what people don't realise. I did an economic and social history degree before I went into entertainment. So I've got a love of history anyway. And every single time I walk into that building, I can almost feel it in my bones. It seeps through the walls, if you like, the energy and those who walk those stairs before you, up to the dressing rooms. I said the dressing rooms themselves have got old posters up in all of them with some of the acts that you recognise big names in there, and some of the greatest names that have ever entered the stage performed there. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I love the theatre and I love the history associated with it.
And you got Cinderella coming up this year.
Yeah. Which is, again, I mean, Cinderella is always one of my favourites, just because it's one of the few that make you actually you feel like you're proper acting. That's what I say about Cinderella. When Buttons is such a integral character, whereas most of the pantomimes, the comic part is just someone that just comes on and it doesn't really have much to do with the plot, if you like. Whereas Buttons kind of drives it all a little bit. He's a sympathetic ear for poor Cinderella who's being picked on, etc., etc. So I absolutely love playing the part of Buttons.
Yeah, I like Cinderella as a vicar now, Steve. I get to tag along to lots of pantos with the school or the whatever group it is, and I must tell you my little funny anecdote, if that's all right, because I was we went to see Dick Whittington at Blackburn Empire a couple of years back, and I was sat on front row, and this little girl tapped me on the shoulder, and she just went, "Father Alex." I went, "Yeah, yeah, what?" She went, she said, is dick a swear word? And and you're thinking, oh, what am I gonna say? I said, well, no, I don't think so. I think it's just another name for, And then anyway, the panto started, and then these swashbuckling panto superstars like yourself, she went, your name is Richard, but I shall call you Dick. And then the little girl
Everyone laughs.
Everybody laughs, and the little girl tapped me on the shoulder. She went, Father Alex, you were right. Dick's not a swear word. Meanwhile, all the class 6 kids at back were laughing their heads off every time somebody said that particular word. But
yeah, it is. I've only done Dick Whittington once at the grad program. There's always they always have the spotted dick gag, which is always hilarious. It's so stupid, isn't it? It's so silly. But they go, "What's that you got there, Mum? It's spotted dick, Dick. Spotted dick, Dick. No, it's just spotted dick, Dick. That's what I said. No, you said spotted dick, Dick. It's not spotted dick, Dick. It's just spotted dick, Dick." Yeah. And go on and on. That sketch it's a nightmare to try and learn that sketch, but it is so funny. Just stupid, isn't it?
But I bet as the performer, you must love the adults getting those,
Yeah,
those gags
again,
that just float above the kids' heads.
That's one of the reasons I love doing pantomime so much, because you can be entertaining the kids with a bit of slapstick, but then throwing in a little one-liner that's entertaining the adults at the same. And it's that little balance between the two, never going too far either way. That I love. Listen, it's a joy to entertain any audience, but to entertain a family audience is the greatest reward, because to see a young kid and an old grandma all laughing at the same time, it's a special thing. It's very special.
So tell us about your cast. You're there in stars on the poster. Who's with you? I know who's with you, Steve, but share with people who you've got with you.
Well, this year I've got Hayley Tamerden. And now Hayley, I did pantomime with 2 years ago in Sleeping Beauty. I've known Hayley for many years anyway. So, yeah, that's great to have her back. And she's just brilliant. She's a brilliant singer. She's a great all-around actress. People remember from Emmerdale and Coronation Street, but in actual fact, she began her life in musicals and stuff. So she's brilliant on stage. And then we've got Kitty Harris, who's Keith Harris's. Remember Keith Harris and all? But it's his daughter who's doing Cinderella. I met her I did meet her a few years ago, but I met her again a couple of weeks ago. And for the Panto launch, if you like, we did a social media day, and she's absolutely brilliant, so enthusiastic about the pantomime, which is always nice to have someone like that alongside. And then the Ugly Sisters, Taz and Jamie, I don't think I've done more pantos with them. I think I've done five Cinderella pantomimes with them, more than anyone else I've performed on stage. So it's a real good company this year for experiment a little bit with the script, etc., because we all know how we all work. Normally, when you do pantomime, the majority of the cast have never worked together before, so there's that little tentative steps, if you like. This year, we can go full belt into it and start messing about from day one.
Just tell us about rehearsals, Steve. I mean, is it proper serious, or is it just an afternoon of having a laugh?
I get in so much trouble, because I do just genuinely love I always say I get in biggest trouble because I'm always creating new ideas. It's just the way my mind works. So it doesn't matter. It can be like dress rehearsal. Steve, why did you do that? We're trying to time this, Rob. It's funny, isn't it? Yeah, but, and I know, no buts. I said, if it's funny, it's funny. We're putting it in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in terms of rehearsals, there is obviously there's got to be discipline about it. But it is also a very creative process. That's the beauty of pantomime. Most times you go into a theatre with a musical, for example, and you'll have a director with a very clear plan and the script, and no one's going to deviate from either. Whereas in pantomime, you go into that room and if someone goes, "Hey, this would be funny if this happened," then yeah, take it on board. And even during the pantomime run, things get added and things get taken out that laughs that don't work, because you never really know what's going to work and not work. So that's one of the big joys again.
So when does it start, Steve? December time, I take it?
It starts, I always get this wrong. It starts on the 6th of December and finishes on the 5th of January. Yeah.
Yeah, full on. And then do you take a break normally after Christmas, or?
No, I have a little break. I normally have a couple of weeks off, and then I've got just gigs again. It goes back to gigging. It's always hard straight after pantomime because I've not done my normal activity like for several weeks, so a little bit rusty. So it takes a few gigs to get the wheels turning again. And then I've got a cruise next March as well, which is quite interesting. I've never been to Australia, and this cruise goes to Australia, Tasmania, and I get off in Mauritius. It's a tough life.
Oh,
you've no idea. You've no idea.
I think I did. Tony Vino came on, and I think he was on a ship with COVID. I don't think he could come off.
Yeah.
I think that's the case. I've got one last question, Steve, because it is the Godcast. I'm not talking about religion in any aspect, but to give this kind of do you think your talent is a gift, Steve? Do you think it's kind of it was something you were born with, or do you think it's something you've had to create? Just perhaps finish.
Well, I grew up and I still, I'm a practice Christian, is like, if you like. My wife's a Catholic actually, so we tend to go to Catholic church these days. But yeah, undoubtedly, I do. I think I have been blessed some respect, because I think the key to it is that I don't realize it. People laugh at me just being me. People just walking in the street and people giggling, and even my own kids will occasionally laugh at me. You know what I mean? But I'm not doing anything. What am I doing? So you can't help but think that's because I'm not trying to get those looks. Do you know what I mean? So I think, you know what, it's probably 50-50. I think it's probably 50% that's God given, and because you work on that. And I think the big, anyone, any job, any career that you do, the more you do it, the more accomplished you get at it, and you know what gets a laugh. So I kind of got much better at that. But I was talking to my daughter yesterday actually. She's at drama college in London, and I went visiting her as I finished my gigs in Bognor Regis on Monday. And I was talking to her, and I was saying, look, the thing is, in 5 years' time, you will think you know it all. I said, I know I did. I thought I was the greatest comedian around in my 20s and 30s. And I'm so much better now, and I'm in my 50s. And when I'm in my 60s, I'll probably think I'm 10 times better than I was in my 50s. You just never stop. And that's what the beauty of it. I don't think there's many jobs where you can really just keep developing and keep getting better at what you do. And I don't mean that in any big-headed way. I mean that purely in the fact that you work hard at it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I love music, Stephen. I go and see bands who I've followed since I was a kid, and they're so good. And I keep saying, so I shouldn't wonder why they're so good. They've been doing it for so long. They should be blooming good. They're pretty practice at it. So, well, listen, buddy, it's been fabulous getting you on, and I'm really glad I got a chance to have a chat with you. And good luck with the Panto in Blackpool. I love Blackpool. I adore it. I think the world of it, and it's got its issues, but it is the home of entertainment for me, and just wish you all the well. And if anybody's enjoyed this chat with Steve, there's loads of comics out there who's been on. Steve mentioned Phoenix Nights. We've had Clinton Baptiste, he's been on. Alex has been on, another lovely comedian, and loads of comics. Dom Jolly, so check him out. But Steve, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Alex. Thanks for having me.